The security guard's boots squeaked over the oil-stained concrete as he walked down the rows of sleeping machines. I kept my back to him, shoving broken plastic into a yellow bin like I hadn't heard his first two calls. The sky outside the window, the one with a spiderweb crack, was shifting from night to bruised purple. It was 5:09 am, my shift on the injection molding line officially finished, though I'd been stacking these flawed bottle caps since 3:30. Wambua home time, the guard said, voice softer than I expected. I dipped my head and hung my apron on the hook. My fingers smelled of scorched resin. Behind me, Mutizo and Jasiri elbowed each other, grinning like they'd witnessed a humiliation. As I made my way through the factory's cavernous darkness, I glanced up at the battered employee notice board. My poster, a call for stories, seeking untold lives of Nairobi DIY film project, still fluttered under a plastic thumbtack. Underneath, someone had scrawled "So what?" in blue ink and drawn a stick figure hanging from a camera cord. Outside, the onion-tinged air was chilly, and low murmurings carried over the tin roof from the matatu stop across the street. Dawn rarely brings silence in Nairobi, only a muted hope. I should have been used to it. But that morning, I simply kept walking, fists buried in my pocket, the ache of rejection numbed by exhaustion. I lived in a single room off Jogu Road, 4th floor, no lift. The corridor echoed with neighbors' footsteps, men coming home from late shifts, women already awake to sweep. My mother sometimes called around this time, asking if I'd eaten or if I'd come back to my senses yet. Meaning, reconsidered my stubborn ridiculousness. I ignored the phone and after splashing my face in the communal sink, collapsed onto my cot. Sleep came in snatches. I dreamt of fluorescent lights sizzling and Mutizo's laughter, always sharper just after payday. On Saturdays when the factory wasn't running, I walked the city. I filmed with a battered Nikon D90, trading interviews for chai and bus fare when I could. People let me into their lives for a few minutes, sharing fragments. The mzee who folds newspapers at Globe Roundabout. The nurse's aide who chases her daughter's school fees in Gicomba. Each story built a mosaic no one else seemed to see. My cousins called it a waste. How will videos feed you, Wambua? My uncle asked the last time I visited Kibra, arms folded over his threadbare Arsenal jersey. Better to work more hours, buy yourself a boda boda, this creative thing is for rich children. Even my mother, who answered every call with 2 prayers for my health, would slip in gentle blows. Your own father wanted to be a footballer. He also liked dreams. Where did those take him? Don't let me bury another one, Mwana. Sometimes their voices made sense. The logic lined up neatly in my chest, threatening to crowd out the little flame I kept. But when I watched my rough reels late at night, flickering faces in tiny kitchens, voices strong despite the odds, I felt myself returning, whole real for a moment. The years blurred. Factory work ate my daylight. By evening I hunted stories. There were hungry months when I rationed mandazi and matoke, turning down weekend shifts to chase a lead. Savings emptied fast. Whenever I visited the family, the same ritual. Sidelong glances, someone asking, have you found real work now? My youngest sister started to mimic them, giggling, director, director, until it strung. I learned to meet their mockery with silence. It was the only armor I could afford. After 3 years, my break came in the least glamorous way. A Dutch student spotted my YouTube channel, 100 subscribers and a handful of shaky interviews. She messaged about a documentary competition, New African Voices, no entry fee, just a pitching video about the city. I filmed her suggestion on my mother's stoop, Nairobi's Sunday chaos as soundtrack. I talked about stories beneath the dust, people whose names and dreams went undocumented, forgotten for being unimportant. I want to preserve them before we all forget, I finished, voice wavering as loud engines drowned me out. Months passed without reply, but I kept filming. One Tuesday, my boss in the factory called me into his office. I thought he'd caught me editing during lunch breaks, but he just smiled with yellow teeth. There's someone waiting for you, Wambua, he said, and the glint in his eyes made me wary. Through the glass, I saw a smartly dressed woman, crisp blouse and sensible shoes. Her name was Emily, with an accent like warm butter. A Dutch local rep. They loved my pitch, she explained. The competition had chosen me to join a regional workshop, all expenses paid. If you turn your idea into something real, she said, you'll get a grant for your first full-length film. I don't remember much after that. My ears rang, I might have nodded. I know I walked all the way home without feeling my feet touch the ground. That night I told my mother. She blinked at me as if I'd sprouted wings. So they want to see you just for this video business, and they are paying you, I nodded, showing her the official email. She licked her lips, not quite smiling. Be careful, Wambua, these Europeans they can trick. At least you still have your factory work, eh? My uncle scoffed outright when I called. Just fill out their forms and get whatever you can, but remember you need steady money. Come home and start thinking like a man's. No one else said much. My phone vibrated for days, but there was more sarcasm than congratulations. The neighbors laughed when I hurried home early one afternoon with a bag of donated camera gear. Someone played a loop of Movie Star on the radio until I stopped reacting. I could have folded then, believing their doubt, but the spark inside me, kindled on sleepless nights editing in my single room, flared at the thought. Instead, I left with my battered bags and my borrowed cameras, headed to the French Cultural Center where we were meant to meet. Over 3 sweaty weeks, I lived in a makeshift dormitory with filmmakers from Mombasa, Kisumu, Eldoret. We traded stories like secrets, shared instant coffee, squabbled over tripod rights. I learned to hold the camera steady while my hands shook and to edit even when sleep skittered around the dorm like a hungry rat. The documentary I made there became my first real film, Between the Lines. I wove together the untold stories I'd been collecting: street vendors, tailors, students on the margins. Their voices, raw and vibrant, filled every frame. When the Netherlands competition ended, I hadn't expected anything more, but 2 judges took me aside after the screening. They asked for links to my older work and scribbled email addresses on the back of their business cards. 6 months after the workshop, just as my lease and my patience ran thin, a quiet email arrived, an offer to pitch my film at a global festival in Berlin, all expenses paid. They wanted my asterisk city on a stage I hadn't even dared to imagine. I spent that night on my knees, feeling both thankfulness and terror bubble up until I was lightheaded with hope. I quit my job at the factory the next morning. The supervisor made a show of sighing and wishing me luck, but I saw how he gripped my hand with both of his, almost as if goodbye pained him. Don't forget us, he said, then added quietly, you got out, eh? I only packed a small bag for Berlin, but I carried every moment of rejection with me. The cousins' jeers, the joke on the break room poster, my mother's worried frowns. On the plane, I watched clouds spiral beneath the wing and decided I would tell my city's story as if my life depended on it. Berlin felt like a hallucination at first. Chilly air thick with exhaust, people moving with too much haste. The festival lobby gleamed with glass and old accents, and I worried my second-hand coat marked me as out of place before I'd even begun, but my film found its legs. Audiences leaned in, sometimes misty-eyed, as mothers spoke of hope stitched into school uniforms, as street poets recited verses into vibrating night markets. People asked me about the camera angles. They asked why I shot so much in dawn and dusk, because those are the hours when nothing is certain, I answered, surprised to discover I believed it. Between the Lines won the Best Emerging Filmmaker prize. Journalists crowded around with questions I'd never thought I'd answer. What was the hardest story to shoot? What is home to you? My answers stumbled out in broken English, but no one seemed to mind. I shook hands until my palm ached. My photo appeared on festival blogs and, weeks later, trickled onto websites back home. But it wasn't until I returned to Nairobi, clutching the engraved plaque and an envelope heavy with grant money, that reality settled in. The city felt the same, hot, chaotic, throbbing with possibility, but something inside me had changed. I walked different, taller somehow, as if every scrap of skepticism I'd swallowed for years had at last cemented my resolve. My mother met me at the bus park, arms wound tight around her waist. When I handed her my plaque, I finally saw her smile properly. You did it, Mwana, she whispered, as astonished as if a mango tree had sprouted where she'd only buried a pit. I returned to Kibra on a Monday. The streets seethed with life, boda-bodas weaving between matatus, children bouncing half-deflated footballs over mud pools. The smells of fried fish and burning plastic strung my nose, and I found myself grinning despite fear nipping at my heels. My uncle was at his usual spot outside the shop, radio perched on his lap. Around him gathered men who'd mocked me in passing, their laughter brash as always. Movie star has come home, someone called as I approached, applause mixed with snickers. I ignored them at first, heading inside to greet my aunt and the kids. But the house was too small to contain what I'd brought. My cousin, ever sharp-tongued, poked at the foam packaging from my new camera. Is that real or just a box for show? She asked, voice pitched loud for the whole room. I unzipped my bag, I pulled out the Nikon battered but loyal, then the newer Sony still smelling faintly of Europe, cold metal, unfamiliar weight. Uncle appeared in the doorway. "So they paid you for playing with these toys?" he asked. I straightened, for once I refused to drop my gaze. "They did," I said slowly, holding out the Berlin medal, letting the late afternoon sun catch on the letters. He grabbed the plaque, frowning over the engraving, careful not to appear impressed. "And what will you do now? Keep running around recording things?" From outside came the whistle of boyhood games, and I let the silence hang, a silence filled with something new, softer than resentment and sharper than pride. "I'll keep telling stories," I told him. "Maybe next time you'll even watch." A week later, I organized a screening at the community center, not the polished halls of Europe, but a dusty room with plastic chairs, a borrowed projector patched with duct tape. Samosas and warm soda stacked against the wall. I passed flyers around the neighborhood, even placing one in the old factory break room on my way through industrial area. Word spread faster than I thought it would. Night came, and with it a crowd, aunts, cousins, former co-workers, half the neighborhood. I opened the film with a trembling voice, then let it roll. Faces shone from the screen, ordinary heroes illuminated by the glow of hope. My mother sat in the front row, her hands gripping her shawl. My uncle leaned forward, mouth tight, as if searching for a flaw. When the final credits rolled, my name there, bold, unashamed, a hush drifted through the room. Then applause, awkward at first, then swelling with something like wonder. A former co-worker hoisted me onto his shoulders, cheering, "Director, director, the world has seen you." For a moment, every snide comment faded. My uncle stood last, approaching slowly. He looked at me, not the camera, not my hands, but me asterisk, with an expression I hadn't expected. "Wambua," he said, voice soft. "We were wrong." I nodded, my throat ached. I was not triumphant, only holes. These mornings I still walk the city with my camera. Strangers greet me by name. Sometimes new filmmakers ask how to ignore their own skeptics. I tell them they won't, not really. Doubt never disappears, it only quiets once you have proof. When my mother places the Berlin plaque atop the old television, she polishes it every Sunday, proud. But I know the real victory was not the award or the new camera or the money. The triumph is in returning through the city's noise, head high, carrying my old rejection like a lantern that finally drew its own light.